Hello and welcome to this Oak Tree English video on grammar expectations for ESOL Level 1. This is the third in a 4-part series. If you haven't watched the entry-level grammar videos, then please do so, because that describes what is expected before this level. In the first 2 videos I showed a chart about the entry-level grammar requirements, which was in the public domain. This time I'm using the same information from a Level 1 exam, but I won't show it as it's password protected. Fortunately for you, I will tell you what it says. It's split into the same 6 areas, but more advanced grammar is expected from you. The areas are sentences, noun phrases, verb forms and time markers, adjectives, adverbs, and discourse. We're going to look at each of these to explain what is expected. I will not cover all the expectations of entry 1, 2 and 3 because I've made videos about them which you should watch as a foundation for this video. I may have already mentioned that. The entry 3 video used examples drawn from British history. This one will use examples about places of interest in the capital city, London. So let's go there together now. The first grammar element on the list is making a good sentence. At level 1, you're expected to be able to produce all 3 types of sentences, that is, simple, with 1 independent clause, compound, with 2 independent clauses joined by a conjunction like and or but, and also, this time, complex sentences with an independent clause and a dependent clause. At level 1, you should even be able to produce a sentence with multiple dependent clauses. I have a whole video on this called Sentences and Paragraphs. But here's a quick example. The National Gallery is in Trafalgar Square. That's simple. It has paintings by Da Vinci and Van Gogh, but it doesn't have any Banksy. That is compound because it has two independent clauses. It has paintings by Da Vinci and Van Gogh. It doesn't have any by Banksy, joined by but. Compound. An example, bless me, an example of a complex sentence. The best time to visit is in the morning because all the tourists come later, which makes it too noisy. This is complex. It has multiple subordinate clauses. Watch this. The best time to visit is in the morning. Independent clause. Because all the tourists come later. Dependent clause. Which makes it too noisy. And that is another dependent clause. It's actually a defining clause, but we'll come to that in a little while. The next thing we turn to is there is, there are. At level 1, you should be able to use this in all tenses, including the past perfect, there had been. Remember to justify the use of the past perfect by saying what event came before. For example, there had been many theatres on the South Bank before they rebuilt the globe. So we're telling you the story from the perspective of rebuilding the globe, and we're saying that before that there had been many theatres. At this level, there's quite a focus on conjunctions. These are words which join thoughts together with sentences, within sentences. This can be done to show contrast, like yet or but. Reason, like since or because. Purpose, such as so or in order that. Consequence, again, so. A result, since or because. And a condition, if or unless, which is where you get conditional sentences, you see. And you also have concession, whereas and although. I mentioned conditional conjunctions. These are used in conditional sentences. You were using 0 and first conditional at entry 3. if you enter the Houses of Parliament, there they are, the Houses of Parliament, you are arrested. If I go to London, I will see Big Ben. You won't. You'll see Elizabeth Tower, which holds the bell, which is called Big Ben, but let's just leave that there for a moment. At level 1, you should be able to use the third conditional. For example, if Guy Fawkes had succeeded, he would have blown up the Palace of Westminster, which today we know as the Houses of Parliament. As you know, clauses are a family of elves who deliver presents at Christmas. They're also things that bears have. However, they are also a part of a sentence, specifically a part of a sentence with a verb. There are a few types of clauses, but the ones you're particularly tested on at level 1 are relative clauses. These are clauses which give information about the subject or object. They can be defining, which give essential information. Hello, Paddington. Nice of you to join me. For example, the bear the Browns found was from Peru. Or they might be non-defining, which give extra information separated by commas. Watch this. The bear, who likes marmalade sandwiches, was found at Paddington Station. The sentence would still work without who likes marmalade sandwiches. You don't need that, but you can. That is an indefinite defining clause, relative clause, a non-defining relative clause. He teaches English, he does. Okay. There are also participle clauses, which add the information by using the ing part of a verb. The bear waiting on the platform was adopted by the Browns. Thanks for your help there, Paddington. Just a few more points on sentences, if you don't mind. You should be able to report speech. That is done either directly or indirectly. Direct reported speech uses the exact words and speech marks. Remember to start a new paragraph for each speaker. Whereas indirect reported speech is where you could convey the meaning in your own words and put it back a tense. At level 1, that should include going all the way back to the past perfect tense. So if I tell you, I've been to Leicester Square, there's Leicester Square, you would report, he said he had been to Leicester Square. If I say, I'll get some noodles, you can report it as, he said he would get some noodles. One of my favourite things to do in London is getting noodles from Leicester Square and then walking around the corner and eating them on the steps of Trafalgar Square. But that's just me. You should also be able to use embedded questions, which is a typically British, over-polite form of asking, which must seem rather bizarre to non-native speakers. This is where a question is asked as a statement without a question mark or in a roundabout way, making the request as part of a different question. Typically these begin with phrases like, could you tell me? Or, I'd like to know. Or, I'm not sure. Do you know? I wonder. Would you mind? Let's ask. For example, I wonder, do you know the way to Oxford Street? I'm not sure where it is. Related to reported speech, you will also be expected to report questions. We'll come back to Oxford Street in a moment. This follows the same pattern in going back one tense, with the added extra of if and whether. For example, if I ask you, have you been on the London Eye yet? You could report this as he asked whether I had been on the London Eye. There's the London Eye. Whether can be replaced here with if you prefer. He asked if I had been on the London Eye. Notice it moved from the present perfect, have you been, back to the past perfect, whether I had been, and inverted the auxiliary back to the statement format. Have you been, I had been. You also have to report requests and instructions. So, taking that earlier example, I wonder, do you know the way to Oxford Street? That may be reported. He asked me the way to Oxford Street, which I appear to be wearing on my head as Oxford Circus. If the answer had been, go up Regent Street to Oxford Circus and turn left, it would be reported, he told me to turn left at Oxford Circus. These are the types of sentence structures which you will need to display at level 1. Shall we find out what else you need? Okay. As well as sentences, you are expected to know about noun phrases. Nouns are words that give a name to something, such as table, chair, love, chickens. As well as everything mentioned at entry 1 and 2 and 3, watch those other videos. You should also know about the word order of determiners. If you have multiple determiners, there is a definite order you should use them. I've suggested the acronym QUADPON to help you remember, but that might be less useful than reading a lot of books. Just read a lot of books and it will come clear to you. The correct order of determiners is quantity, all of, some of, articles, the or a, demonstratives, such as this or these, possessive, like my, your, or Sadiq's, and number, like number 10 or 15. For example, most of the 15 houses in Downing Street were demolished. This is one of the few that remain. This one is one of the few that remain. Notice what we've got there. So most is quantitative quantifier of the, an auxiliary, as an article. Most of the 15 number houses in Downing Street were demolished. This, which is a determiner, do I mean determiner? Demonstrative is what I mean, obviously. This one number is one of the few that remain. An important type of determiners are articles. These are things that people often get wrong, so let's be clear about this. English has only 2 articles, which you can extend to 3 or 4 if you want to be picky. These are the definite article, the, for defined or unique things, and the indefinite article, a or un, before a vowel, an before a vowel, for singular things among many. There are also 0 articles for plurals and generic things like uncountable nouns, but this is just a fancy way of saying we don't use a word. For example, London, 0 article, has a river, indefinite article. The river, which river? The river in London. The river is called the Thames, definite articles. You should also be able to express possession. Oh, there's the Thames. You should also be able to express possession in a number of ways. These can include the possessive apostrophe, London's river. Possessive adjectives like my, your, and its. Its river is dirty. Notice its has no apostrophe. This breaks the rule because it apostrophe s is it is, and therefore it's not the same thing. Of course, a possessive adjective is not to be confused with a possessive pronoun like mine, yours, and theirs. This is my city. This city is mine. It's not, but yeah, this is my capital. For more details on the apostrophe, please see my punctuation video. You'll also be tested on tenses, that is, time. I have a whole video on all 16 tenses, and I have another video putting them all in the passive voice, which will help you to put all of this into perspective. At level 1, you will be tested on all of the entry 1, entry 2 and entry 3 tenses, plus the present perfect continuous and the past perfect. The present perfect continuous is used to talk about events that happened over a period in the past, which have an effect on the present, such as, how long has the Tower of London been standing? The Tower of London has been standing for almost 1,000 years. It hasn't been used as a prison for about 70 years. The past perfect is formed with had and the past participle, and is used to talk about events further in the past than another event. Another way of saying that is to tell a story from the perspective of a past event and describe what came before. For example, St. Paul's Cathedral, I'm wearing it like a hat again, was built after the original had burnt down in the Great Fire of London. Had burnt down in the Great Fire of London. 1666, for those of you who are wondering. You should also be familiar with the passive voice, especially in the present and past simple tenses. This is where the subject has the verb done to it by the object. An example in the present is Admiral Lord Nelson is buried in St. Paul's Cathedral. Admiral Lord Nelson is buried in St. Paul's. Or in the past, St. Paul's was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, who, by the way, is also buried there. I think he was the first person to be buried there, which is quite cool. His epitaph is, if you want to see a monument to him, look around. You can check out my other video for a fuller treatment of the passive voice. You should also use the conditionals we discussed at entry 3. That's 0, first and second, and then add into the mix the third conditional. This is the one which talks about unreal event situations, usually about times in the past, such as, if Germany had won World War II, London would be very different. Lastly on this slide, let's get rid of that, that was a disturbing image. You should be able to use the verbs have and get with a causative meaning. That is, when you have something done for you, or you get someone to help you out. Anytime someone does a job for you, it's a chance for you to use this form. For example, Londoners get Sadiq Khan to organise the city for them. Sadiq Khan there is the Lord Mayor of London. And His Majesty the King has the windows at Buckingham Palace cleaned for him. In this case by Sadiq Khan, but that is thanks to AI image generator. I don't think Sadiq Khan actually cleans the windows at Buckingham Palace. That is just a generated image which I thought I'd play around with. If Sadiq Khan, if you happen to be watching this, please don't send anyone to arrest me. Thank you. So there we go. Those are the verb forms you need to know. Modal verbs are a form of auxiliary or helping verbs which don't change with different subjects. For example, I must, you must, he, she, it must. They're useful for certain functions, such as expressing obligation. Would, should and could are followed by the are modal verbs, and they are followed by the auxiliary have, never, of, by the way. Ought expresses suggested obligation, such as the commonly suggested sentence, the British Museum, there's the British Museum, ought to return the Elgin marbles. But this is more of a debate. You see, this can also, we can here can use the interrogative form. Ought the British Museum return the Elgin marbles? I'll let you research both sides of the debate and come to your own conclusions. I don't actually have an opinion, which is unusual for me. Needn't is not the opposite of need, that is prohibition, but rather the absence of obligation. And this is the same with don't have to, such as you don't need or you don't have to use the tube to go from the British Museum to Covent Garden. This is because they're quite close and easily walkable. And actually, I think Covent Garden is the tube station you need to go to get to the British Museum, but don't quote me on that. You should also be able to use would to express a hypothesis. This is not the same as would have or would like. This is when you say that you would do something in a certain situation. It's strongly connected to conditional forms. For example, London would welcome visitors from other planets. I would live in London if I had to, though I have to say I quite enjoy leaving London at the end of the day. This is, by the way, an example of a UFO that was taken, photographed over London. This is definitely in no way a still from Doctor Who. Excuse me. Would like, by contrast, is for expressing wishes, and this can be done for describing other people's wishes about yourself or other selves, when followed by an object, an infinitive. That's a lot of words. Let's see if we can put that into a sentence. I would like London to be a little less busy. I would like London, object, to be, there's that infinitive, a little less busy. This brings me to the last area of marking for verb forms, phrasal verbs. You are expected to know and use a range of phrasal verbs, or multi-word verbs, where you have a verb and a particle, often a preposition. The examples given in the mark scheme are these, which I will demonstrate in sentences. So give way, hold out, run into, which of course have both figurative and literal meanings. The door gave way, and we all fell into the Thames. I was holding out for, a boat to save us. When who should we run into, meet by chance, but Boris Johnson? This is not AI generated. Boris Johnson really did go down a river in a coracle. He did lots of fairly crazy things, which made his premiership interesting. Having covered nouns and verbs, let's turn to adjectives. These are describing words such as beautiful, simple, angry, green, incredible, but not Hulk. At level 1, you should be able to compare using the correct choice of fewer or less. Fewer is for countable nouns and less for uncountable nouns. For example, there are fewer people and less poverty in Kensington than in Enfield, 2 districts of London. Kensington is very, very wealthy. Enfield is not quite so salubrious. You should also know which adjectives collocate or go with which prepositions. For example, afraid of, famous for, good or bad at. For example, London is famous for its history and modern attractions. Don't go on the London Eye if you are afraid of, famous for, afraid of heights. Here's a chap standing right on the top of a London Eye pod, which seems a very silly thing to do. But there we go. Next, we turn to adverbs and prepositions. You will be expected, along with other prepositions, to express concession, that is, using prepositional words and phrases like though, although, in spite of, or despite. For example, although the fire of London was a tragedy, it made the modern city possible. Despite London's historical attractions, it is a surprisingly modern city. You will also need to be aware of nouns and verbs with specific collocations to prepositions. To teach this one, let's go to St James's Park. There's St James's Park. He pointed at St James's Park because he had an interest in pelicans. There are the pelicans. There are pelicans in St James's Park. You'll be expected to know and use a range of adverbial phrases. These should include time, early morning, manner, as quick as the wind, degree, hardly, extent, 2 week, place, up a tree, in the park, frequency, occasionally, and probability, certainly. Here's an example of that. Early in the morning, as quick as the wind, a squirrel runs up a tree in the park occasionally. Okay. Now you know from entry 3 about comparative and superlative adjectives by St James's Park. Good, better, the best. Did you know there are also comparative and superlative adverbs too? They're formed and work in the same way. A boat moves slower than the tube, but it feels the most relaxing form of London transport. You can use comparatives in conjunction with intensifiers. Using the same example, a boat moves quite a lot slower than the tube, but it feels by far the most relaxing London transport. And it's a lovely thing to do, just getting on a boat and going all the way down the Thames and back again, so you see loads of sights. But that's for when you go to London, and I'm a little bit scared because that boat may chop my head off any second. Let's move on. Finally, in this very long list of grammar you should know, we come to discourse. You should use discourse markers to show addition, in addition, for example, cause and effect, as a result, contrast, however, and sequence, firstly, finally. Spoken English and written English have certain differences. There are also markers which are specifically for spoken English. For example, well, London has loads to do. There's some things to do in London. Okay, so, well, London has loads to do, okay? So I won't get bored then. You should be able to use the punctuation mark ellipsis. This is written as 3 dots and is pronounced as a long pause or a trail off into silence. The last prisoners in the Tower of London were the Cray brothers, who I'll let you Google them. There you go. That's the ellipsis. I hope this video has been helpful. If you've found that there are areas of grammar which you don't understand or you need to practice, then that's exactly what you should do. Ask your teacher for exercises on the areas you find most difficult, and then practice them until they are second nature. Within a few weeks of doing this daily, your English will have improved massively. I hope this helps. I hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please remember to like, share and subscribe to Oak Tree